Hi everyone, welcome to my nerdy weekly roundup. Hello. Well, as you can see, the tan's already starting to fade here, here in the UK. It is cold, it is wet, and it is miserable. It has not stopped raining all weekend. But hey, welcome to the UK. So I was just looking. Yes, it's still absolutely tipping it down. So, what better way than to cheer ourselves up with some reviews of the shows I've been watching? So let's kick off with the Peripheral. So I'm still enjoying it, pleased to say. The pacing's a little bit up and down, I will say. The shows do seem off a little bit slow, but then they gather momentum as we're going through. But overall, the story's still really hanging together, and I'm still very much interested to see where all this lands. Each episode, we seem to get more questions than we do answers. But yeah, so far so good. So obviously, as I was away, there's actually episodes 3 and 4 to cover. So I'll probably skip some bits, but try and get through it as detailed as possible, so you're all up to speed. So episode 3, we start with a flashback of Pickett, who obviously has been approached to take out Flynn and Burton for $9 million after seeing what they shouldn't have seen in the future. And this flashback is in 2015, and he's there with his young nephew, Jasper. And at this point, he was running a car dealership. Obviously, now he's basically a drug dealer. He's very shady, lots of money, very powerful in this small town. So anyway, he was a car dealer back then. He basically saying that he's found God and he's giving up the dealership, which, knowing about the man, is quite ironic. And we see a whole group of Hell's Angels arrive at the dealership, and he's got all these SUVs, sort of military grade, that bulletproof, and the glass and the gas tanks bulletproof, and this, that, the other thing, to be secure. The bike gang all get off their bikes, and like all of them get into the different SUVs. So it's like, so basically the whole lot of them are in these cars. And then they go to basically turn on the engine, and the engine won't start. Everything's locked down. Now, obviously, this is in a town in the south of America, so it's like an incredibly hot day. And basically, Pickett turns to like his nephew, and basically sort of says, "Yeah, I bet they're regretting that bulletproof glass now." And basically, do you know how hot it's going to get in these cars? And the kid's like, scared stiff, going, no. And he goes, it's going to get up to 140 degrees in 7 minutes or something like that. He goes, but I looked it up, how quickly it's going to basically take to kill them. so obviously these Hell's Angels are banging on the windows and trying to get out. And he basically tells the kid who was washing the cars, says, like, spray some water, because they're going to remind them how thirsty they're going to get soon. So obviously we're really getting some information about just how cold and ruthless and sort of psychopathic this Pickett is, that he's not going to think twice about taking Flynn and Burton out. So then, then he basically says to the kid, he's got all these wooden crosses, because he's basically saying he's going to place his billboards with these wooden crosses because he's found God. But basically says, like, to the kid, like, get these crosses, put them up, lay them down by the side of the road. And there's a big bucket, and he kicks it over, and it's just full of nails. So you can pretty much take from that he's basically planning on crucifying all these Hell's Angels. We then cut to Flynn's time, and current Pickett, and he's in the pool, and his wife comes over, talks to him. They're basically talking through this hit, and they're sort of like, well, is it real? Are you being set up by Homeland Security? What's the options? Because if you agree to do this job and it's a sting, you're going to go to prison. We could take the money, but don't do anything. But then if it's real, we could be upsetting the wrong people. And they have a whole conversation, and basically they decide, and this is why we're kind of introduced to Jasper, was for him because he's married to Flynn's best friend, Billy Ann, who's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But basically say that let's try to use Jasper to get information around what the Fishers have got themselves into, and try and find out if this offer's legit. In the meantime, like Burton's continuing to sort of fortify their position with the money that they obviously won through the lottery. He's now bought out the 3D print shop that Flynn worked in, so they're kind of using that as a bit of a base of operations. And Flynn's just sort of getting a bit irritated, like her brother sort of taking control, but obviously he was in the Marines, he's military, so it's just sort of second nature to him to kind of step up, and he's basically just sort of trying to say, look, I'm just trying to keep everybody safe. And she gets it, you know, but I think she's as frustrated by the situation as he is, like, you know, how they've got into this mess kind of thing. She'd been out with said Billy Ann and basically spilled her guts and told her everything. So Burton sort of starts this conversation with her, like, you know, we've got to be careful what we say. I've told everybody the absolute minimum. I've just said that you were in a sim covering for me and you saw something you shouldn't, and now there's people after us, and that's basically why he's ex platoon or helping him. And of course, she just goes, oh, well, I told her everything. Well done. So obviously, Burton absolutely goes, what the hell? And they start arguing. And she's like, oh, well, you've got all your friends and I've only got Billy. But he's like, yeah, but she's married to Jasper. And she's like, well, I told her. She's promised me she wouldn't say anything. And he's like, that's not how it works. And have you forgotten who Jasper's uncle is? And then you kind of see the penny drop with her. And she's kind of like, oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have. But you know, then she's just sort of like, you know, looks the other way kind of thing. Then we go to London and we see Lev basically taking the Peripheral, which is the model of Flynn, out of a box, like a wooden box on the floor. And Flynn's like, you don't keep her in there when she's not connected. And he's like, oh, well, what else would you do with it? It's just a thing. And he's often making references how Wilf is actually sort of, you know, has more humanity and empathy basically than he does. He's just like completely ruthless. He's just like, oh, he's just being an idiot. What's your problem? And then there's a bit of a discussion around something that happened in Wilf's past. And he says that he's never told anybody about the neoprimes and what he did to them. We don't know what neoprimes are at this point. And Wilf looks very like a lot of regret and quite some guilt around that. And he's like, no, I didn't even tell Alita. And they're supposed to like, oh, you should like just, you know, like free yourself, free your burden, and you'll feel much better, kind of thing. You know, true words by a psychopath. And then Flynn obviously arrives in the Pult, or in the Peripheral. And basically, obviously, her mother, at the end of the last episode, we see the drugs work that they sent, so her mother can see again and is recovering. So she tells them what she saw. So once they got the eyeball and they'd gone into the building and the levels and basically saying, you know, she got hurt and ran away, but she stayed and basically, you know, the avatar of her brother, the Pult of her brother was killed, and that's kind of all she knows. But that should be enough for them to, you know, to start a search or figure out what's going on. They then one of Lev's associates or what employees, I think, really, called Ash, asks her what she knows about Pickett, and does she have any, you know, have any contact with Pickett or associated with him? And so Flynn explains no, I don't want to. And they basically bring up on I say it's like a monitor. Well, it's not even a monitor, but it's like digitally displayed in thin air kind of thing. The news broadcast from 2015, and yes, indeed, he did crucify all the Hell's Angels, and you've just got imagery of these guys obviously nailed to crosses. And Flynn's just like, oh, could you turn that off, please? So they do, and she obviously basically explains that he's not a good man to cross, and he's a sort of drug trafficker in our time. And they're like, well, we think, looking at his IP and looking at his internet traffic, he's been looking into you and your brother, and we think someone from our time has contacted him to potentially take you out. So obviously she goes back to relay this information. We then see Wilf going to visit his adoptive mother. So him and Alita were adopted at the same time. Alita's slightly older; she's 2 years older than him, and basically they went there to basically just get a daughter. But Alita wouldn't go unless they took Wilf as well. His name was actually Wolfgang, but they felt it was a bit too non-English, shall we say? So they changed it to Wilf. But these are two incredibly wealthy, probably aristocracy kind of wealthy people who adopted these two children. So when he goes to visit their massive stately home, basically he's got like no relationship with his mother, and it sounds like Alita didn't have one either. She makes a comment about when their father died, they didn't even go to the funeral. So everything's very frosty, to say the least. And then the mother has programmed one of the peripherals, who's the housemaid, and he walks in and hears Alita's voice, and she's singing, and it's the peripheral. And he's like, that's a bit disturbing. And she's like, well, I get lonely because, you're not around. So there's this sort of frosty exchange. And he's trying to ascertain when she last saw Alita or spoke to her. And she sort of says she basically ran into her about a month ago in London and asked how she was and where she was staying. And she kind of gives this, she was always into like riddles. And she says, where snow last fell in London is where she's staying. And he's like, well, what does that mean? And she's like, I don't know. You have the relationship with her. You asked him to leave. We then sort of obviously back with Flynn. She's telling her brother all about Pickett. Pickett says he'll deal with him. Burton says he'll deal with Pickett. And it's sort of a bit of a argument ensues. I mean, they are siblings, but there's an awful lot of squabbling that goes on. I will say there's a lot of arguing in this episode, the next episode. But basically, she's obviously sort of saying that let's not stoop to his level by, taking care of him. Do you mean you're going to kill him? You're not like him. And then obviously the brother points out, well, I was Marine. I was trained to do this, kind of thing. But she's like, well, we're better than that. And he's like, well, if you can come up with a better idea, then let me know. And she's like, well, promise me you won't do anything without talking to me first. And he's like, yeah, well, I promise. And he goes off to see Connor and the boys. Then Flynn goes back to London. When she sort of wakes up in her Holt, she's in the taxi with Wilf. And they're trying to basically retrace the steps that they took when she was in a taxi with, or when she was carrying out her initial mission to find out where Alita was. They're going around various streets, and she kind of recognizes one, and then they end up getting out of the taxi to walk around because it might be easier, it might jog some more memories. They've got some technology which enables them to kind of sync up. So she can see what Wilf's seeing and Wilf can see what she's seeing. It's a really sort of strange experience. And initially she's like, whoa, I feel really sick. And he goes, oh yes, sorry, that's my hangover. So he does like calibration thing so she can sort of just see without sort of feeling what he's feeling. And they go off and start looking around. And this kind of leads to a Met Police peripheral following Flynn, because all the algorithms and peripherals should behave a certain way. He sort of like she's off by a certain percentage, so he's sent to investigate. She contacts Wilf and says, do I need to worry? And then he sort of goes back to Ash and says, has she been registered? Are they expecting it? And they're like, oh, she's registered, but there's a few augmentations which might be frowned on. And he was like, oh, great. You could have told me before. I went for a blooming walk with her. So he catches up with Flynn. This Met officer peripheral comes over and starts questioning them. And we've sort of said to him before we got there, like, follow my lead. And when I touch my chin, say you want to go home. So he's going into spiel that basically that is the person in it is actually from Canada, and he's put in for like 10 trips for her to see London. The thing goes like, checks paid. Oh no, we haven't got any paperwork from that, and you know your permissions have been revoked. You need to go straight away. And Wolf just keeps going and sort of saying, well, actually, this is all my fault. The Polt is actually an ex-girlfriend, and I should have got a new one because she was saying it doesn't look enough like her, and we got into an argument, and that's why we got out of the taxi. And then he goes on to say how he's like actually getting feelings for her, and he's very attracted to her, and she's mysterious, and this, that, and the other thing. And he's sort of saying in a way like, is he actually saying that to Flynn, or is he just making it up? Because he's all very, and they basically end up kissing. And then he's sort of, and then Flynn's like, can I go home? And then basically the police officer lets them off, but says like, you know, you've got to file all the paperwork, and Flynn goes back. While this has been happening, there's the Dr. Newland, who's the big bad in all of this. She's sort of top of the tree. She's the one who put the hit out on Flynn and her brother. There's conversation around Grace Hoggart, who worked at the place that they broke into, and it transpires that she was roommates with Alita at school or college, and they've maintained a friendship and quite close. So they've sort of made the connection. That's how Alita knew what was in this restricted area, or this top secret thing that Alita was trying to steal, or did she steal? So Dr. Newland's like, I'll deal with this. So bad news for Grace. And then there's basically, even though Burton promised to speak to Flynn first, he goes off to see Pickett. They're basically sitting outside, and Pickett's like having lunch or whatever. And Burton goes in saying, I've got a carrot and a stick, let's hope we can go with a carrot. And he basically sort of says, like, I'm sure you've been contacted by a certain group of people. We're prepared to pay you $200,000 a week to leave us alone. And I'm sure that will more, cover any payment they're offering you. And Pickett's like, I don't know what you're on about. He goes, oh, really? Because it was like $9 million last week. So if they're offering you any less, you're being shortchanged. And Pickett's like, oh, okay. And there's sort of this like to and from, peeing up the wall transaction conversation. And Burton goes on to explain, obviously, about when he's in the Marines and the implants that he's got, and how it's all designed that you're basically one unit, and you think together, you feel together, and there's this like sort of closeness and camaraderie that they can't understand. So if for any reason something should happen to him and his sister, the rest of the unit is gonna come after them. So sort of take the money or else. And he's like, well, am I supposed to be scared by that? And he sort of got a pint glass in his hand, and basically a sniper just shoots the glass in his hand, and he's like, you can either take the deal or the next one's in your head, basically. So they kind of shake on it. Then we've got Dr. Newland, who goes to see Grace, and there's an exchange, and she asks her about Alita, and how could she possibly have found out. And she's like, I didn't tell her anything of consequence, or I didn't think I did. And she's like, well, clearly you did. And she's like, oh, I've messed up, I'm really sorry, sort of won't happen again. But as we've learned, this Dr. Newland, again, there's a lot of psychopaths in this show. Basically, takes no prisoners. They're basically sort of sitting there, sort of drinking afternoon tea. And Dr. Newland explains that there was something in the tea that's now doing something to her pheromones. And they're kind of like in this big sort of greenhouse kind of setup. And there's all these bees just flying towards this glass, and there's like more and more of them. And the Dr. Newland's a cool as a cucumber, just gets up and goes, and the woman's like, I've got 2 children, like, please, I'm really sorry, it won't happen again. And she's just like, yeah, so you know what lengths, you go to protect your children. So obviously, what the secret that she's trying to hide, that Elite is trying to get out, is monumental. But basically just opens the doors and this swarm of killer bees comes in. And again, because she's given off this pheromone, they only attack her and basically sting her to death. We then go back to London, and Flynn's with Wilf, and is sort of looking out this scene sort of over Trafalgar Square, and it's snowing, and she's like, oh, that's not real, is it? And he's like, no, and he sort of waves his hand, and then, a bit like to death, he looks out and he's just Graham peeing it down. Shocker. So she basically said, he sort of explains that he was just trying to get into Alita's head, and his mother told her this riddle and about snow and falling. And Flynn sort of thinks about it, and then sort of references that she's got this paint. Her mum's got this painting at home, referring to somebody like falling, and like maybe Snow's a person and not the actual thing. To which that like a light bulb goes on in Wilk's head and says, "Oh, Jon Snow, not that Jon Snow, but a different Jon Snow." Who like created some sort of antibiotic or something, was Alita's absolute hero, and he had a residence in London. So he goes, obviously, asks the computer, like, where did Jon Snow die? And it gives them an address. So so they go off to the address. This is basically where Flynn was brought that first time. So when she gets there, she knows how to open the curtains, the fake wall. They go in, and the place has kind of already been ransacked and a bit trashed. There's a grandfather clock, and Flynn goes, "Oh, we've got one of those at home, but it's stuck on. It doesn't work. It's stuck on a certain time." This is like 10 to 12, and Wilf asks, well, what time is it on in your town, and she's like 2:15. So he moves the time on, and then a secret doorway opens, and they go through, and it's the operating room where also they took the eyeball out and put the eyeball in in episode 1, and the peripherals, the surgeons are dead on the floor, so something's happened to them. So Wilf then sort of takes like their implants, almost like their chip, out their neck, because they might be able to trace who the operators were. And then as they're looking around, Flynn sees this big kind of 3D printed copy of basically her house, Burton's trailer, and even little models of Burton and his friends. And she's like, I live here. What the hell? Why has she got this? And Will's like, I don't know. And then they find a little box that has an implant in it, which is Alita's implant. So they can't trace her. And he sort of puts that in his pocket. But then as they go, then Dr. Newland's henchman, Daniel, who's the person that obviously attacked her in the first episode when they were stealing the secret thing. So he comes in with that pulse gun again and another peripheral, and fires the gun at her, and she goes flying. The other peripheral attacks Wilf, and they're fighting. And Daniel goes right up close to Flynn and basically fires it in her stomach, sort of chest stomach area, and basically makes a comment that it won't kill her, but the trauma leaves a mark, and sort of fires it at her, and she's like, coughing, not doing very well. And Will's fighting with the other one, which catches Daniel's eye, and then she manages to like get up and hit him and snatches the pulse weapon and fires it at Daniel. He goes flying. She then, meanwhile, Wolf has managed to kill the other peripheral without putting this big rod thing through his chest. And they basically, through this peripheral that was fighting, Dr. Newland can look and see what's going on. They've got Daniel. She's got the pulse gun up against him saying, why is she after me? What is it she wants from me? he's just like, she's never going to stop. She's never going to stop until you're dead, kind of thing. Just, and things like getting really like what does she want? What does she want? And the other peripheral that we thought was on the ground out gets up the great big machete and basically kills Daniel before he can give any information. So Dr. Newland basically kills Daniel. And earlier on, you kind of see that, she sort of says she's quite fond of Daniel, but again, complete psychopath. So, so that's kind of the end of episode 3. And then we move on to episode 4, which has a great intro. So this one starts with Wilf and Alita when they're young, sort of 10 and 8 years old. And we see London, and it's basically devastated. You kind of got Big Ben or Westminster, but got chunks out of the sides. There's just rubble everywhere. And there's this kind of like fog, kind of yellow everywhere, like really down close to the ground. You can barely see what's in front of you. So something quite devastating's happened, which is very, very contrary to how we're sort of seeing London in 2075, which is all pristine and shiny and very modern. This is like an absolute, like a bomb's gone off in London. There's Wilf and Alita and some other kids basically living on a an old red double-decker that's kind of just abandoned and sort of almost buried into the ground. So they're staying in there, and they've been scavenging for food. Obviously, and then we get the basic food's very, very short. And they're like, oh, you're not pulling your weight, you've got to get more food. And then they start hearing some voices outside and like, come and get it, free food kind of thing. And basically Wilf's sent out by one of the sort of the head of the gang of these kids, who doesn't seem like a very nice boy, but basically he goes like, you can pull your weight for a change, go and find out what's going on. Alita's like, no, she's coming after him. And basically said that kids are going missing. If you go over there, you won't come back. But Wilf sort of runs off because he wants to prove himself. And he kind of gets to a wall. He's hiding behind the wall, and he's kind of looking at this image, and it's like something just doesn't quite look right. So he throws like a stone at it, and it kind of sort of vanishes and reappears. So this is all basically a hologram. So you kind of got a hologram of almost like a Red Cross type outfit. They're calling out to the children to come for free food, and we can get free food. There's a queue of kids because basically they're trying to clean the streets. So he then sort of steps away and starts running back to the double decker, and Alita's out there. And then basically see 2 people in these bright yellow, almost like hazmat suit type things with gas masks come running out and grab Wilf and Alita. So a very different version of London than we've seen previously. That is kind of alluding, obviously, something's happened between 2032, where Flynn is, and 2075, where in London. Yeah, then we go to the 2075, and Wilf's talking to Lev. He basically is showing him the implants that they found, and the implants from the 2 peripherals. And Lev's basically sort of saying to Wilf, look, you're going to have to brace yourself that she's probably dead. It's only a matter of time before we find her body. And Wilf's like really taken back by this, like, well, why would you think that? And he says, well, without her implant, her immunity, she won't have an immunity boost. So obviously all these implants they've got. So again, something's kind of gone on. They've got these immunity boosts. So how long is she going to last without this implant, basically? We go back to see Flynn. She's in the bathroom and she's washing her face. And as we've seen in previous episodes, she keeps having problems with her hand. It keeps sort of squeezing up, like clenching really tightly by itself. And this is like sort of cramping up, but then it's getting more and more severe. So she's washing her face. She goes to brush her teeth, and she's got hold of the toothpaste, and she just starts squeezing it. And then she looks in the mirror, and she basically starts seeing this sort of bloodshot eye and black eye appear, which is like the same as the injury she received when she was in the Peripheral, when she was in 26, when she was hit by the energy pulse. So she's like, like, what the hell's going on, kind of thing. And then she looks down, and then she looks back up, and the bruising's gone, and her hand's back to normal. But this is like kind of freaks her out. Tommy, the policeman, who was obviously, was her schoolgirl crush, comes over. He's in plain clothes, and just walks up to Bert and says, "Oh, I saw you talking and shaking hands with Pickett. That makes me a little bit nervous. So, I'm here, plain clothes in my car as a friend, just to sort of say, is everything okay? Are you all right? Do you need anything?" kind of thing. And Burton obviously just kind of sort of dismisses it and goes, "Yeah, everything's fine. We're fine." And sort of Flynn comes out, and just sort of says, "Yeah, there's nothing to worry about." And Tommy says to her, "Is everything okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, everything's fine. There's nothing to worry about." So Tommy leaves, Flynn and Burton get into yet another squabble, basically saying that she's sort of like, "Well, maybe he could help. He was here as a friend." And Tommy's like, we can't trust all these people, and you're not impartial enough to be talking about this. You're too emotional when it comes to Tommy. And then she sort of starts freaking out, and sort of massively overreacts, really. I mean, she starts going into, which will valid, but she just kind of loses it. She massively overreacts, because Tommy, so Burton found the 3D printed icon of Tommy in her room, which she threw out. And then she's basically, "I was here by myself when you were off at war. I had to take care of it when dad died, this, that, and the other thing. And yeah, I had a stupid crush, and how dare you use that against me?" And she's basically like just really freaking out. And then she's like shouting, the black eye starts appearing on her face again, and her eye goes all bloodshot, and then her hand starts cramping, and she basically collapses, and she's like having a seizure, sort of frothing at the mouth. So obviously, Burton takes Flynn to the doctors to get her checked out. Again, they sort of agreed to say the absolute minimum they need to. And as it goes, the doctor is, of course, Tommy's fiance. And again, Burton sort of brings up, "Well, are you gonna be okay?" And she's just like, "Look, let's not talk about this again. I'm fine. Let's just go see the doctor." She's even like, "I don't even need to see the doctor." And he's like, "You kidding? You just had a bloody seizure." And so they go see the doctor. They do some initial tests. They can't see any sort of residual. She goes like, "If it, the symptoms are kind of like suggest this, but we're not seeing any of the after symptoms that we'd expect to see. For all intents and purposes, you're perfectly healthy. We can't see anything wrong." But they're going to send her for a CT scan and do some blood works, which again she kind of all thinks is bit of a nonsense. And the doctor asked for information on the company, because they basically had to say she was doing some simulation to explain why she had a seizure. The doctor wants the details of the company so she can contact them or find out if there's been any studies or trials or any information on this headset, obviously not realizing what it actually is. So Burton sort of goes, yeah, but he'll going to try and store as much as he can. In the future, Dr. Newland has basically, because she's a bit sick and twisted, has created a peripheral of Daniel, who obviously she basically had the peripheral kill him. So she's basically got like a new version of Daniel as a sim, and he's able to tell her that Wilf was there, and that he's an associate of Lev. So that kind of then sparks an idea that she needs to go speak to Lev and try and shut all this down. Then you got Burton, Connor, and Leon, and they're all sort of saying like one of them's got to go into the simulator. Obviously, Connor, Burton has just been chomping at the bits, going, because he wants to see and experience what his sister's seen. And then we're arguing who's going to go in, because basically they've got to go talk to them to say what's happening to Flynn and what do they know, and is it to do with the headset. So there's all a bit of and then basically Connor says like, when you go, is there like a full body? Because obviously he's the amputee, he has the no legs below the knee, and he's lost one arm, just below the shoulder. So he's only got the one arm. So he's like, basically, he volunteers to go. When he first arrives, he gets a bit, he's so overwhelmed with having arms and legs, he like sort of runs off and crashes through a window and wants to go run in and go exploring and experience this whole new world kind of thing. He kind of forgets why he's there. Obviously they know it's not Flynn. They go, it's Connor, one of the brothers' friends, and they terminate connection. So Connor goes back. And they're like, hey, what happened? Is everything okay? And he's like, yeah, but you got to get me back. You got to get me back. So they send him back again. And then we don't see that, but it basically transpires that he's able to tell them what's gone on with Flynn. Wilf, so Flynn's got a sort of VR. So basically, you made like home videos. There's a home video of her and her brother when they're really little, at Halloween with their father, sort of trick and treating and stuff. And there was a company that was able to turn these sort of home videos into VR. So she's sort of sitting in the VR watching herself and her brother when they're little, and her dad, just sort of reflecting, I think. But Wilf's able to kind of go into the VR and starts talking to her, and it says, okay, we've been told that you're having seizures, and she says, is it to do with the headset? And he says, we don't know. We really don't know. And she's sort of like, wow, that's the first time I think you've actually told me the truth. So basically, we're going to look into it, and obviously, if it's not safe for you to keep using the headset, we will say, but kind of take care of yourself and stuff. And she's sort of asked about any news on Alita, and he's like, no, but sort of fearing the worst. And there's sort of he's talking to her about her brother, because obviously watching him and that your brother and stuff, and she's like, he's like, do you have a good relationship? And she's like, well, I love my brother, he's my brother, and yeah, we look out for each other. And then he basically tells that Alita's his sister, and that's why it's so important to him. And Wilf leaves. Meanwhile, back in London, Dr. Newland has turned up at Lev's. And again, there's a lot of afternoon teaing going on in this show. Obviously, that's what Americans think the British do all the time. I don't know. But anyway, they're outside having some afternoon tea. And there's a bit of a, exchange. And Lev's like, I don't know what you're on about, but if something was stolen, you'd go to the Met and tell them about it, unless of course it would be something that you wouldn't want the Met to know that you've got. And it's all like, they were like, yeah, well, if I did have something like that, blah blah blah. So there's an exchange going backwards and forwards, and then but basically the upshot of it, she sort of threatens Lev, was kind of sort of saying, stop rocking the boat, the way of the world is the way it is, and you may not like it, but it keeps everybody safe, it keeps everything ticking over. And basically explains about there was an associate of his who died quite nastily. Again, similar to like sort of DNA technology, a bit like the bees. It was basically ate to death. There was like nothing left. And she says, all we need is DNA to be able to use it, kind of thing. And even Lev looks a bit concerned at this point for all his bluster. And then she gets up to leave, and he stands up. And she walks off, and then he looks down. Basically, his teacup's gone. How she managed to, or how he didn't even see her taking it, I don't know. A bit of a moron. But anyway, so now she's got his DNA, and she's basically warned him to back off, or she's going to unleash these bugs on him. Then we find out then. So Flynn's then insisting on going back into the simulator. Now she knows that Alita's his sister. So again, there's a bit of a sort of set to about that. But basically, they say, well, we'll let you go in as long as we can come in with you. So next time she goes back, she's to ask that, and she basically asked that peripherals are created for Connor and for Burton. and obviously so they can all go in, or they'll take turns going in, especially if like she can't go back in because of the condition. And Flynn told Wilf when he visited her about how sort of Lev's family in her timeline, so I guess his mother and father, or when he would have been a young child, were brutally murdered a couple of weeks before. I think they were all like burnt to death or shot and burnt to death or something. So Wilf goes to tell Lev this, thinking that maybe someone's like put a hit out or something's going on. To which Lev just laughs and sort of basically says, yeah, I did it. So every time as I explained, every time they go back and create a stub, there's like an offshoot of time. So every time there's a new stub, he basically goes back and merges his family because he doesn't like the idea of being other hims or other his families being out there. They're all psychopaths. So even like Wilf was like quite shocked by this, and again, Lev just sort of makes comments about how really like for despite the work that Wilf does, he's actually a bit of a softie underneath, and I think it's just a case that he does have morals. He's not a complete cold-blooded psycho. So Lev just dismisses this, thinks it's hilarious, and tells him to get on with things. So when Flynn next goes back, they've now, with the aid of some of Burton's friends and sort of technical friends, basically hackers and all that kind of uber geek, uber techs, are in the 3D printing. But what they're able to do is, as she's there, they can counteract what's going on in the future. So Flynn gets there, she meets Ash and says, there's different types of game players. I'm an explorer. And she basically leaves Lev's place, starts walking around London, and Ash follows her. And she's like, I'm trying to find out what you won't show me. And again, she's like, where are all the people? Because obviously London's absolutely dead. There's like a handful of people now. Anybody seen London or seen it on the TV? There's 8 million people in London. It's a pretty busy place, and you just literally see handfuls of people. Sort of back in Flynn's time, the hacker's doing a really good job. His mate elbows him out of the way and thinks he can do a better job and fluffs it. And Flynn comes back, and then the other guy jumps back on, and then Flynn goes back in again. But again, basically asks the question about what's going on, where are all the people. So Ash then takes her to a cemetery, and Lev's redirected Wilf to go meet them at the cemetery, and they basically start talking about what they call this jackpot event. And they say it's a bit sort of basic sort of gallows humor, sarcasm. It's not jackpot in a good way. And there's basically a series of, so there wasn't one thing that took them out. It was a series of things that happened over quite a period of time. So in 2039, so just 7 years later on from Flynn's time, they're in 2032. There was someone hacked the North American grid and cut all the power, and then basically this continued spreading and basically took the power around the globe. This was then followed by a pandemic, a blood plague, they called it, that then caused the liver and the spleen and things to flood the abdomen with blood to basically to the point that you exploded. So it sounds pretty darn gruesome. And that sort of happened. And then that followed on by a kind of world collapse, like climate. So there was a famine and droughts, and then antibiotic failures, and the animals all started dying. And this happened over four decades, and 8 billion people were wiped out. And then the final thing that destroyed pretty much everything was there was a domestic terrorist attack in America. Turns out a place called Spring Creek, which is, lo and behold, where Flynn and her family live. And apparently there's a nuclear silo there. And obviously, basically, there's a terrorist attack, and they took over the silo and detonated the bombs that were there. So these sort of 4 events all happened one after the other, or sort of over a period of time, and took out the world from what we can gather. And that's it. That's where episode 4. So again, it's like, so what we seeing in 2075, is that really London, or is it is that all a simulation? Is London still a wasteland? Why, is it a coincidence that where the nuclear silos were is where Flynn lives? Yes, there's lots of things starting to converge now and crossing over. Really interesting, sort of explaining, like, what's going on. It's kind of, we're getting to know a bit more what's going on, but we still have no clue what's going on. And what's Newland trying to hide, what did Alita steal? So yeah, I'm still really enjoying this show. Hopefully it carries on, sort of building to a good conclusion. It's every Friday on Prime here in the UK. I think it drops at the same time in the States. So if you do like your sci-fi and a bit of time travel and a bit of sort of twisty turny thriller at the same time, and a show full of psychopaths, this is the show for you. So moving on, something I am so excited about. So I'm going to do it pretty much spoiler free because it only came out on Friday. Of course, I've already watched all 10 episodes. Hello. I did manage to split it over 2 days. I did try and pace myself. Oh, Netflix, you should have dropped this weekly. We were used to getting it weekly. So as much as I've loved binging it over a couple of days, that's it now until part 2 comes out, which I think is next year. Oh my God. So for those who don't know, I have mentioned it on this channel a few times. So Manifest was a show, I think it was on ABC for 3 seasons. We have a flight 828 that took off from the Caribbean, experiences some turbulence, and then lands in New York safe and sound. When the passengers go to disembark, they're surrounded by police and FBI agents, and they all get like herded up and taken into a hangar. They were like, thinking like some terrorist attack or something has happened. And what transpires is the plane's been missing for 5.5 years. So everybody in the plane hasn't aged a day. For them, the flight took the normal amount of time, like however many hours it is from the Caribbean to New York, I think 4 hours or something. But they've been gone 5.5 years. So obviously the repercussions of that various loved ones have moved on, they've got remarried, or they've got new partners. People have passed away. Their lives have just been absolutely like ripped out from underneath them. The main family in this is the Stone family. You got Ben Stone and his sister Michaela. Ben's married to Grace and has twins, Cal and Olive. So they were all in the Caribbean together with Ben and Michaela's parents and Michaela's boyfriend Jared, who had proposed to her and she'd accepted. They're both in the police force. When they come to leave, there's been a mix-up with like bookings and the flights overbooked. So Ben, Michaela, and Cal agreed to go on the next flight, and the rest of the family go. So Grace, Michaela's boyfriend, and Olive, Cal's twin sister. Cal's also very seriously ill. He has a form of child cancer. So he's obviously having treatment for that, and it was very it was very unlikely that he was going to survive that cancer, and it was part of the reason of this holiday. So anyway, so when they arrive back, obviously everybody else is aged. So Cal's twin sister is now 5 years older than him, and he's still a little boy. Grace has a new boyfriend. I'm not expecting to see him again. And Michaela's boyfriend has married her best friend, as you do. So you can imagine. So this is what I love about this show. You've got lots of personal complexities and the impact of, unlike Marvel, who doesn't address the blip at all, this kind of explores, what happens if you were taken away for 5 years and drop back in. So you've got a lot of the personal interactions, like would relationships stay together? Would people break up and go back to their original partners? But I think Michaela's and Ben's mother passed away in those 5.5 years, so they're grieving the loss of their mother and weren't able to say goodbye. It's a great setup. Now, once they're all back and they've got all this turmoil to deal with, they then start hearing and seeing things. So initially they will just hear save him or go to him, or these really random things, and all these things, and basically every single passenger on 828 starts getting these, and these are what they call the callings. Then over the course of the seasons, you find there's some really serious repercussions if they don't follow the callings. Some of them will die because they don't follow the callings, and some of them. So, and then there's like two branches of 828ers. So there's kind of one branch which is like Ben and his sister, and they're trying to help and understand what these callings are. Another branch sort of thinks the callings are evil, or doing, not doing God's work. It's kind of religious group, and how all these things kind of converge. So in seasons 1 to 3, spoiler, Ben and Grace get back together because, as much as she sort of tried with her boyfriend, I think it was a case that, he wasn't her husband, but she loved him. But now the husband's back. So the family's kind of back together. Grace gets pregnant, and initially, based on the timings, it's not clear if it's Ben's or the boyfriend's. But then Grace starts having callings, even though she wasn't on the plane. And then we realize they're coming from the baby, so therefore it has to be Ben's. And they end up having another little girl called Eden. And then there's an 828er, Angelique, who's an absolute nut job. She's got religious zealots as parents, all sort of fire and brimstone. She's looking for her guardian angel, and a fire breaks out, and she happens to be saved because Eden was in the room. So now, she thinks Eden's her guardian angel, and this girl's massively unstable and ends up kidnapping Eden and killing Grace. And that's how sort of season 3 ended, with Grace dying, her taking the baby. They'd also, over the course of these 3 years, found the fuselage to 828 under the ocean. So we're like, but the plane landed and blew up, so how can there be wreckage in the ocean? So this wreckage is then with this, obviously with the government agency, and a couple of the 828ers are working on it. Scientists are working on this thing, and Ben and Cal end up getting smuggled in because they've got this calling, and it's calling them there. Cal touches the fin, the fuselage, and disappears. So Ben's like freaking out. Then the very last thing that happened in season 3, we see the pilot of the plane appearing in the cockpit, shouting, "Help me," I think it was, and then the whole thing disappeared. And there's a hell of a lot more going on in this show, seasons 1 to 3. It's on Now TV, Sky here in the UK. It hasn't moved to Netflix, but if you get the chance, do go check out seasons 1 to 3. There's so many stories and so much more complexity. But obviously, they're trying to work out what these callings are. Are they visions? Are they divine? Are they evil? And they keep seeing this ash falling. So there's some sort of apocalyptic event they're heading towards. And are these callings there to help prevent this, or are they there to make it happen? They don't know. So going into season 4, so originally this had a 5 to 6 season story arc when it got cancelled. So Netflix picked it up, and I think they said they'd do like an extended season 4. I think it's normally 10 episodes a season. This has got like 16 or 17 episodes. The part 1 had 10 episodes, so we've got potentially another 6 episodes to come in the new year. So this has taken a 2-year time jump. Which again was handled really well. So it sort of opens up. You've got Ben looking very disheveled, like an absolute broken man. He's like scruffy beard. He's obviously a very well kept man before. He was a university professor, and he just looks like a hobo. And he's got all these leaflets, and he's putting the leaflets up saying missing daughter, missing for 2 years, and here's a sketch of what she might look like. So they didn't have to go around and implicitly tell us 2 years had gone by, but for various things, we know 2 years have gone by. He still doesn't know where Eden is. There's also some posters up, like Cal's missing, he's run away. What I forgot to say is at the end of season 3, when Grace is dying, you see an older boy, which is basically Cal with his mum saying, "It's okay, mum. It's all connected. You know, we'll see each other again," kind of thing. So Cal's back now. He's 5 years older, so now he's about the same age as his sister. But obviously they've had to hide the fact that it's Cal. So they're saying he's a cousin. He's Gabriel. Because obviously if the government find out he's back, he's just going to end up being a lab rat. So again, it says spoiler free. So we knew at the end of season 3, Cal was back. Not saying any more than that. But I just really want to say how well it's actually been handled on Netflix. I love these 10 episodes. I think, you know, because of the limited time they've got to wrap up the season, it's very fast paced. Obviously, you know, they're having to cover 2 years, or bring us up to speed of where we would have been in 2 years. And there's a series of flashbacks covering some gaps between what happened at the end of season 3, what's going on now, sort of little backstories of what's going on with the various characters. Everybody's back in it, which is great. The girl that plays Angelique, I can't remember the last time I had so much disdain for a character. I absolutely loathe this girl. She's absolute psychopath. She thinks, you know, she's on the side of right. She thinks she's a flipping archangel who's there to, you know, cast judgment on every. I can't stand this character, and I so hope she gets her comeuppance. I have to say, so well written. I'm sure that the poor girl who plays is probably absolutely lovely, but oh my god, I hate this character so much. It's Angelique or Angeline? Might be Angelique. I know, but doesn't matter. I just can't. I detest the girl. But it's so well written. Jeff Raker's done such a good job moving things on, but still having pace, that we're not lost, or there's not massive gaps that we're like, well, what happened about that and what happened about this? Everything has flown on really, really well. The cast are just brilliant. There's such good casting, such good acting in this show. Because I think with all these sort of mystery box shows, you've really got to believe, you know, you've really got to believe what the characters are going through and what's happening for it to work. And they've absolutely excelled at this. So I'm like, well done, Netflix. You've done an absolute. I think the thing is that Netflix haven't interfered. They've just let the original creative team and Jeff Rake carry on writing the story that he planned to make. Have not stepped in and told him to do anything different. And that massively shows that it looks like there's been no interference at all, which is fantastic. So I absolutely loved it. I said, Gussie and I've already watched it. I was determined to go, I'll just try and do 2 a week and try and stretch it out. No, I think I'd done 7 on Friday, 4 on or the other 3 on Saturday. Absolutely rubbish. But it's that kind of show. You get to the end of the episode, there's always a cliffhanger, and it's like, oh god, I need to know what happens. I love this show so much. I'm probably going to do a separate one about Manifest and get into some spoilers for season 4. But I didn't want to do it yet in case you are trying to watch it weekly, or you just haven't had a chance to watch it yet because it did only drop on Friday. The fact that weather's been so absolutely disgusting here, I don't think anybody's really ventured leaving their house because it's like absolutely sheets of rain, which didn't help because I had planned to go out on Saturday. It didn't happen. So unfortunately, I've got through it, but fortunately, I loved it. It was fantastic. I'm not disappointed. I'm just like so excited for part 2. And it's kind of setting up like you kind of feel, I think, what's a tangible ending where it's kind of going. And I'm okay with that if it's what it is. I don't know, but yeah, it's shaping up well. Well, not a twist, but something you just didn't see coming at the end of episode 10. Oh my days, OMG. Talk about pull the rug out from underneath you. Yeah, I was just like, oh no, oh god, didn't see that. So yeah, fantastic job, well done, Jeff Rake and crew. So do go check out Manifest. So hopefully you can catch up on seasons 1 to 3, because trying to watch season 4 without it will make absolutely no sense. But do get involved in this show; it's absolutely fantastic. As everybody who watches my channel knows, I'm a sucker for this mystery box stuff. So, but it is looking good for a good solid ending. So fingers crossed. I think part 2 is dropping next year. Can't wait. So, yeah, what else is coming up? So I saw on Netflix there's a trailer for something called A99, and it's from the creators of Dark, that you might have also seen on Netflix, which is a German sort of sci-fi, again, time traveling show, bit mind bending, one you really have to pay attention to because it happens in 3 different time zones over 3 seasons. I absolutely love Dark. Yeah, it's just stuff. It's just sort of the sort of thing that you just don't get over here. It's just not. I think it's probably more. We would have got it maybe in the 70s in the UK, but we just don't really get stuff that you have to think about too much anymore. So I'm really excited to see this. So this is set on an immigrant ship on its way to New York. Something happens. Some events happen that change the course of the ship, and then all kinds of mysterious, strange events start happening. And that's kind of all we know. There's a couple of trailers on Netflix. Do go check them out. I think it's looking at the trailers, it's partly in English, partly in German, because obviously Dark was in German, but you can watch it with subtitles or dubbing, English dubbing. Yeah, so I'm really excited. This again looks massively intriguing. Could be a bit mystery box-ish, don't know. But the creators definitely seem to like their sort of time travel, spooky, supernatural type stuff. So from the trailers, it looks really intriguing, very exciting. And again, like I think it will be. I assume it will be dubbed if you're not a subtitle type of person, but saying quite a bit of it is in English. I'm assuming probably because of the success of Dark outside of Germany that they've opted to do a partly English story. And that starts on the 17th of November, so just a few weeks away. But it's great to see, obviously we had a lot of sort of spooky, supernatural stuff in the run up to, I was going to say Easter then, up to Halloween, obviously. And yeah, I've enjoyed some of that. Like I said, the Devil's Hour, very good. I'm doing a review of that shortly. And yeah, just watching a few old horror films, and some of them some sort of great sort of kids ones like Goosebumps, which I actually love. Yeah, and then obviously then we're looking at then the run up to Old Crimbo. We've got Spirited coming from Apple, which is Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds. So laughs are playing. Well, it's either going to be they're just too much, the pair of them together over the top, or hopefully it'll be spot on and very, very funny. It looks like a play on A Christmas Carol. I guess a bit like maybe like Scrooge. I don't know, but let's see how that goes. And obviously, Netflix will have their usual Christmas cheesiness coming. Wait and see which ones we're going to get this year. I think there's one with Lindsay Lohan, so who knows what that's going to be like. But hey, who doesn't love a bit of cheese at Christmas with some crackers? So that's it for this week. Say just a quick catch up on the Peripheral, and say spoiler free of Manifest. And I will see you next week. Look at the state of my hair. Hopefully it won't be continuously raining, and yeah, I might be able to actually get out the house, which would be lovely. But anyway, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I will be listed on Monday over on the Spacebook. We'll be reviewing one of our shows from bygone years. Should be an Atomic Pop either Wednesday or Thursday next week, where I'll be looking at what's going on in pop culture news and giving you my musings and thoughts. And then circling right back to another Nerdy Weekly Roundup next weekend. So have a good week, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.